Welcome back to SEO Conspiracy.com. Bonjour, Monsieur Bill Slawski.
Hello.
From I have the legend himself. I'm so honored to have you on board because I've been reading your stuff since forever.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
And I know you have many pet peeves as far as SEO myth, urban legends.
I just want people to think critically, think for
Mm,
themselves, and not get misled because there's so much misinformation on the web.
mm, mm.
It's a great source to find answers to questions, but sometimes the answers you find aren't very helpful.
Especially in our field of study, which is search engine. I like to call myself a search engine hacker, and I think you are too. We have a job of SEO consultant, but really we are search engine. I'm not a black hat SEO as far as making money with tricks and stuff, but I like to, and I think you do too. You like to solve the puzzle. But why do I say legend? Because you are definitely one of those few who are part of the history of this industry. It's not a small achievement what you did to become yes, like I said, part of the history of search forever. You put your mark inside this industry forever, and yes, thank you for coming in this brand new podcast. I'm not new to the industry, but I'm French. Never spoke about SEO in English before, and we're gonna go down first. Let for the very few who don't know who you are, we're gonna dissect a little bit of your personality and why you are doing that, and where do you come from, and then of course we're gonna go into your favorite myth, and we'll see where it takes us. We have no time constraint. It's the long format. On Monday, 7 a.m. is the short format, a few minutes on one topic. And with Bill, it's freestyle. Don't have any notes. I don't need any because I've been following Bill. And before we were preparing this podcast talking about flowers. That's how much we're confident that we because yeah, Bill. Let's start with that. Why you told me that because your parents were gardening a lot, but same with me. But because they got me to do so much work in the garden, I didn't want to have a garden. But you went the other way.
I moved to California 5 years ago, and I grew up on the East Coast of the United States.
Mm,
The plants and the flowers here are different. They're not what I grew up with. Uh, so there are eucalyptus trees all over the place because in the 1800s, somebody got the bright idea that if they grew eucalyptus, which grow fast, they could have wood for railroad ties.
mm, mm.
So they grew eucalyptus trees and then they tried to build some railroad ties from them. And they found out that they weren't very good at railroad ties because if you put this railroad, if you built the ties out of them, stuck them in the ground on rails, they would move around too much. And
Got it.
the railroad lines wouldn't stay in place, which wasn't safe for a train. So we've got all these eucalyptus trees all over Southern California, and none of them are in train tracks.
And what I loved is the little story you told me, and how I rebounded on this, where you say, okay, my mom told me that this flower is good next to this flower because the bug, this flower is gonna keep that bug away, and that bug eats that flower.
Right. So
That's
marigolds tend to keep some bugs away from some of your vegetables.
But that's also SEO. That's the way we solve the puzzle. We go for and then we try to link something together. And nature is like the Google algorithm, the black box. You gotta try to figure out with what you see you can't see everything. You see a little part, and you try to solve the puzzle. And that's the SEO spirit that hopefully some of you watching take a big lesson on how to become a great SEO, not just average.
I,
Like
I may have
great.
to come back and I'm going to shut a window.
Go ahead. Let's go back to the beginning before SEO by the sea. How did you get into search?
I was working as a technical and legal administrator at a courthouse,
Okay.
and I was working on I was supervising a bunch of court clerks who went up to courtrooms and did sentencings or handled bail. They issued warrants, things like that. I had 22 people I was supervising, and I had a friend who hated his job. He wanted to quit, and he didn't know what else to do. I was reading a book at the time about how to incorporate people in Delaware uh, as a registered agent. And I suggested he do that, build a website and start offering his services. The technical requirements for being a registered agent is you maintain a mailing address so that people can reach you in case they're going to provide service or process on
Okay.
one of your the companies you're an agent for, which isn't too hard.
Yeah.
So he said, okay, but I don't know HTML. I said, I don't either, but I have this book called Learn HTML in 2 weeks. I can put one together. And around 2 weeks later, I had a website for him.
Same story for me, and that's how I started. And that was what year was that?
That was 1996.
Yeah, that was I came in 2003, uh, but you know the era before Google, you know yeah,
Right.
Alta Vista
So,
and all
so,
those. Yeah.
so my friend's sister worked for Alta Vista, or she worked for Digital Equipment Corp.
Okay.
So if you, she sent us an email one day saying, our company built this website and you may want to check it out, and gave us a link to altavista.digital.com.
Yeah.
And we looked at it, said, this is pretty neat. We want to be in this. Figured out how to get in there. It wasn't too hard.
Yeah.
And then Google came along not too much later. So we did
Yeah.
the same thing with them. And that it was when I sort of started doing SEO.
Do you want to let's okay, before we go into the cargo of cult that you wanted to bring up, talk to me about the history of SEO by the sea. How did that come about?
SEO by the Sea, I went to a search conference in New York City, one of the search engine strategies conferences, which costs a lot of money to attend if you were paying for it. I was a speaker, so I didn't have to pay. Costs a lot of money to stay at a nearby hotel and to travel. So I said, okay, why not have a conference that's free that people attend, and as attendees, they choose a topic and they speak, sort of like a bar camp these days.
Got it.
You attend, you show up, you talk, everybody listens, they talk, you listen, and you all have a good time, learn a lot, and go home. So I said, let's do that. And I was working in Havre de Grace, Maryland at the time, which is a bit north of Baltimore. It's on the ocean. There are a bunch of ships of different types docked there. It's right in the Chesapeake Bay.
Okay.
And it's a very busy weekend town. Not too much happening during the week, but a lot of people go there to sort of get recreational, enjoy the days, enjoy
Got
the
it.
water.
So
Yeah.
that's why the by the sea comes from.
So I was looking at the window, watching sailboats going up and down on Chesapeake Bay, and the idea of the name SEO by the Sea came to mind. So I built the website, one of these WordPress 2-hour websites. added places to stay in the area, things to see, things to do, when the conference is going to happen, and spent a few weeks adding content to it about the conference that I was going to have for free. Had the conference, and not as many people show up as I wanted, but still we had a good time. We took a skipjack, a type of boat, out on the bay, and we all talked and had a good time, learned a lot. So I had a website with nothing to do. So I said, I'm going to write to this. I'm going to blog on a regular basis. So I started writing about patents on the website, and I kept it up.
Wait, hold on. I kept it up. That's when I say the other day someone was asking me what's the number one quality required for SEO, and I always say never give up. It's not I kept it up. You never give up.
It's
okay.
Being persistent. It's waking up in the morning the next day saying, okay, I'm going to write about something today. Let me find out what it is.
Thousands of posts. Like, you know what, like, how many thousands? Because I don't know the exact, but I definitely can imagine it's in the thousands.
There's at least 1,400.
Okay, so you see, I was not too far, but imagine, I mean, 1,400. That's insane. That's what a great SEO is. Never giving up, and if you can even come close to catching one glimpse of the spirit of what Bill is made of, you can achieve great things, because not giving up for so many years after 1,400 articles, just not asking anything in return, ever. Giving without expecting anything in return. Nothing. And that's also what makes I'm also a giver, so that's we either always lose because we take care of other people, right? But also, you know, that the biggest surprises, and we make the greatest winners because we don't expect anything back, and what comes back sometimes is beyond what you could have ever imagined.
Well, Albert Einstein said, when somebody asked him how he does what he does in terms of uncovering new information and discoveries and things like that, he said, I'm not especially gifted, I'm just passionately curious. And it's the same type of curiosity that drives me to dig through patents and find something I want to write about and try to break them down into something that can be explained, something people can understand.
Yeah, and I thought we'll come to that later in the fact that people sometimes want to understand the only thing that they want to understand, right? The cognitive bias of confirmation, and you can repeat it over and over. It's just a pattern, and they extrapolate on something else. But that's for a little bit later in the discussion. Let's keep on. So, where can we? What's the best place to find you on the internet? I know you are very active on Twitter. Is it the best place if I want to talk to Bill? That's where I should go. Or is there
Twitter's choice? Absolutely. I blog at SEO by the Sea. I also blog at the Go Fish Digital website.
Oh, and comments on your blog also. It's one of the few blogs with active comments in the entire web, actually.
I still have comments. I still have a blog roll. I sometimes get emails from people asking me how much I have to pay to be in my blog roll. Like, pay? No, these are people who I know, who I talk to. There was a time when you had blog rolls just because you listed other people who did the same type of thing you were doing.
Exactly. Yeah. It was just natural. And then this whole like, oh, you can't swap link with people, it's dangerous. SEOs have always been, but it's been natural. Okay, because I like Bill, I'm going to link to Bill, and one day because Bill got to know me. Maybe he's gonna link to me, but it's not. Yeah, a bunch of nonsense.
I
This thing of.
I had a client who was a lawyer,
Mm,
and I blogged for him. I wrote in his blog every day. We had a big block roll with a bunch of other attorneys who were lawyers, who were bloggers,
mm,
and they would write every day too. So sometimes we'd write about stuff they were writing about, give our opinion on it, and actually have conversations with them, blog post by blog post.
yeah,
It was fun.
that's yeah.
We sort of had an ecosystem of lawyers talking to each
That's
other.
that's amazing. I did that as a one-time thing with one topic, and we were answering but doing it ongoing. I could see it being very valuable. Wow, that's very cool. And as far as your work goes, what do you? I'm not gonna ask you what you do. You do SEO, but what's your favorite type of client or work or situation to work on?
So one of the things I'm doing right now is I'm working with some clients on SEO strategies.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of interesting because bring back uh, recycle some of the practices that we used to use 10, 15, 20 years ago. Like I had one client many years ago who was a flour maker, and he made gluten-free flour out of rice. And he didn't know how to build links to his website. And I said, okay, so you've started this website, you started this flour business because you've got celiac disease.
Mm-hmm.
Your body can't handle wheat. And there are celiac organizations across the country. People who have the same problem, same disease that you have, their body doesn't react or allergic to wheat.
Okay.
Contact them, write them
Mm.
letters, tell them about your flour, tell them about your website, tell them that you started the website because you've got the same problem they do. And you're trying to give them affordable flours. Your wife uses this flour to make recipes that call for an equal amount of actual wheat flour made out of wheat. He had a client who was a pizzeria who was selling gluten-free crust. And it was one of the first in the area. They sold incredible amounts of pizzas that were gluten-free. It was all his link building was done by writing letters to people. So I'm telling a new client recently about link building by writing letters. And they'd never heard anybody do that, but it really applied to them
Yeah.
because it
Oh.
they provided services that certain people really could use.
I even go beyond. What I say is, I like to build links by shaking hands and drinking beers, meaning that what does it translate to today is I open up Skype, I see who's connected, and like, can you make me a link because I know you have a website about it. But that was done by shaking hands, by meeting people, by real connections. So through letters or events or networking, whatever. But what you are saying is people forget the basics of the basics. And maybe, yes, the mailbox, that's a pretty high level growth hacking technique, right? The mailbox
Right.
is empty. You get a lot of attention if you write a good letter today because what is interesting in
So
the mailbox?
I, I explained a tactic to them, but I explained a strategy in that they're building relationships. And
Mm.
building relationships is one way to promote your website. And here's some tactics you can use to promote that, to take advantage of it.
But do you, so that's strictly SEO. Do you also enjoy going beyond, like more like search in general, even vocal or paid, just search? Or even do you go outside of search, like digital marketing in general, social media and so on? Or more like SEO centric?
So the team I work with at Go Fish Digital do creative content campaigns, and we do interesting stuff. But we sometimes get together on Slack and brainstorm. And so we had one guy who had been on Reddit and found a guy who had a YouTube channel with a hydraulic press.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a client that was a jeweler. So he came up with the idea of getting the jeweler to submit a diamond to the guy with the hydraulic press channel on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
The guy had 500,000 subscribers.
Mm-hmm.
And he was looking for new things to crush on his hydraulic press.
Cool.
So a client sent him a 1 carat diamond with a little certificate, and he proceeded to crush the diamond with his drill press, with his hydraulic press.
That's very cool.
He put the client's name on the description for the video, and the video got, I think it's up to 11 million views at this point. So part of the idea behind this campaign was to build brand awareness, to let people know who these people were. So this is one way to get their name out there. And it was very effective.
That's, and I spoke the other day about this. The only problem we have is that this is for the people who are amazing at what they do, like the top 1% of the creative, right? The people who can make something exceptional. And we can debate that everybody can be awesome at what they do at a certain level, but we are faced with Google, who put a threshold at this awesomeness, right? Meaning, I don't think everybody is equal in this world, and there's only the top 1% who is able to achieve what you just described. So now the problem is for the 99%, what do they do?
Okay, so that process of brainstorming, if you include your clients who are subject matter experts, who know the clients they work with, what problems they have, what questions they have, and you actually talk to them and think about that and come up with creative ways to reach out to those people, you can make a difference. So we had another client who was a limousine company, and they had driven many people to many places. They're in the Washington, D.C. area. They've driven many people to many places where they're driving couples, and the guy would propose during that trip. They would drive to a certain location. They would get out for a while. You would get down on one knee, pull out a ring, ask her to marry him.
Oh, very
and
cool.
She'd say yes or no. And we created a map of places in DC where people would often ask somebody to marry them.
That's cool. Wow. Okay, that's a whole new facet of what you do that I guess people are not aware of. That this whole very creative, basically content marketing with a SEO layer inside it. I guess that's what it could be, right? Instead of just being pure SEO basic. Before we move on to your favorite myth, your favorite urban legends. What else could we add to know more about you? Okay, so gardening is one of people who know Bill knows that flowers, gardening in general is very important to you. What else? What else in your life could you share that is not on the obvious, or what you like or dislike?
Okay, so it's sort of obvious in the name of my site, SEO by the Sea. So I moved to the West Coast. I didn't change the name of the site because I just changed seas.
Is that sorry to cut you off? Is that behind you a painting of waves right behind your head? Is that
yes,
also?
it is.
Yeah, it is.
It's the wave. It's a famous Japanese landscape picture. Yeah, it's a version of that painting done by a local artist. He used to doodle a lot when he was in high school, and he didn't know what to do for a career. And he jokingly told somebody, "I can keep on doodling."
And what about the sea? I guess yeah, because you live by sea, but what is there that really attracts you to the
Oh,
sea?
so I grew up near the sea. We used to go hunting. We used to go fishing. Used to go crabbing, stuff
Mhm.
like that. The family would get together. We'd enjoy that. Uh, so I decided I wanted to live near the sea again. And so I decided to move out here to California. I'm about 10-minute drive away from the beach, which I haven't been able to visit recently because it was closed.
Yeah.
I've been walking down the beach for the last year or so, at least once a week.
And that's what brings peace to your mind. You feel good. This is why you're in a good place by the sea.
It's very relaxing. Yeah.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, that's when we, and I guess it comes with age. So the youngsters listening to us, maybe at one point in your life, you're gonna. Me is when I go down the mountain with my mountain bike, and I found what's called a flow. And you are one in nature. It's dangerous. We go very fast, but it could be on a boat, could be anywhere, could be. But yeah, you need to find that place where you feel good, and it's the best. It's the best feeling when you.
When I was a teenager, it was
Mhm.
walking down the boardwalk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't go into nightclubs, stuff like that
Mhm.
at the beach. And
Lovely.
now I'm walking down the beach by
Mm.
myself or with friends. And
Well, you do look at peace. You do look like you have. You don't look annoyed or anything going wrong. You're in a good place, I think, and I'm very happy for you. But now
thank
let's get into the things that make you mad. So tell me about right before we go on, you DM me a PDF. So
you.
tell me a little bit about this.
Okay, so the PDF is from it's about it's a commencement speech from 1974 at Caltech by Richard Feynman on a topic of cargo cult science.
Fascinating, yeah.
Now, cargo cult, for people who aren't familiar, uh, during World War II, uh, there were people who would crash land on islands in the southern seas in the South Pacific, and sometimes they'd get rescued, and sometimes some of the natives from those islands would go back with them to where they came from and get to see the airports and the landing strips and the
Hmm.
control towers and all the wealth, all the treasure that people had. And they would bring those natives back to the islands, and some of them got into their heads that if they built airstrips with control towers out of bamboo and reproduced them perfectly, they'd get planes landing on their islands, bringing them treasures.
Love it.
So those were known as cargo cults.
Okay.
So Richard Feynman said, okay, so we had this happening where these people were following practices and they didn't quite understand what they were doing, but they were trying to reproduce them so faithfully that they would get treasure, and treasures never showed up. And some people perform what you might call pseudoscience,
Sure.
where they're sort of trying to imitate some scientific practices, reproduce things out of bamboo, and try to make them work to the point where planes land and they get treasure.
I see where you're going with that. some 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 SEO
So
tools are in the
so
target here.
people perform correlation studies
Mm, mm.
where they say, okay, we've studied millions and millions of pages. We've noticed that URLs from pages that rank on the first page of Google tend to be shorter.
Mm.
Therefore, make shorter pages or pages with shorter URLs. because there's a correlation there. What they sort of miss is that hypothesis is built out of bamboo. It doesn't have
Exactly.
it doesn't have the causation part. It doesn't say this is why
Yeah.
pages that rank first on Google tend to have shorter URLs, which is the important part of science, the why.
The why. And when I started, when I decided to open this YouTube channel called SEO Conspiracy, some people said, but are you ever going to run out of topics? I'm like, no, no, impossible. I mean, it's endless. I can go forever, and we can, because then sometimes something is not true, it becomes true, not true again, like the realm of follow. If Google was going behind, and then it was not going behind, and then going behind again. It's endless. It's endless, endless. We're not going to cover all of them today. We're going to cover your favorite ones. Then we're going to go into more into the mindset of what you need to be. How do you become a great SEO? What makes you go above, beyond the normal? But this whole, now I get the cargo called science, and to go back into correlation doesn't mean causality. The example by my friend, Professor Sylvain Perronnet, who is a PhD in algorithm, he says, all the Nobel Prizes eat chocolate. It's not don't, if you eat chocolate, it doesn't mean that you're going to become a Nobel Prize. Exact same thing. And some of those myths are just based out of thin air. The magic of SEO, I'm going to let you begin with your myths, because if I start, I mean, so what's your biggest pet peeve? The biggest one?
People making assumptions, believing that they're somehow true based on some gut feeling, not science.
So you're talking, before the specific, you're talking about reverse engineering Google in general.
I'm talking about some people try to reverse engineer Google without bothering to do some of the work. It's like I spend lots of times looking at patents, and the patents tell you about the problems they try to solve with the patents, the algorithms that are used as problem solvers, and the steps that they might take to follow to reach those goals. Well, somebody writes about something like rank brain, and they say, okay, rank brain, is that something you can optimize a page for? I mean, it's sort of as if they don't quite understand what rank brain is, that it's a query rewriting process.
And it's only one layer. What you're saying is also that we can only analyze where we see, where we can get a grasp on, and we're missing I mean, we see the beginning, we see Google bot discovers an URL, we see this URL back into an interface like a search engine result page. Everything in between is a mystery box, right?
Right.
The good news is we don't need to reverse engineer everything to get results. But in the process, some Illuminati are definitely sometimes coming up with something like domain authority. It's one of my favorite one, or this LSI keyword thing. Yeah, let's go into LSI, because I think that was one of your big battles, right? So latent semantic indexing, latent semantic analysis.
Maybe in my own mind, it was one of the biggest battles. But I've come across people talking about how LSI is important for Google in many ways, and you can use LSI keywords to build pages to rank better. And you ask them, okay, what is an LSI keyword? And they'll come up with a dozen different things that they say are LSI keywords, like query refinements in a set of search results, the list of people also search for type topics at the bottom of those results. Those are not LSI keywords. There are actual specific processes Google comes up with to generate that list of terms. And I've looked those up.
Yeah,
And
and it's actually different than Google suggest. It's a specific algorithm actually.
yeah,
It's not even.
so the,
But the magic of SEO, and we talked about it right before going on live, is in 2003 Google bought Applied Semantics,
right.
a company that is doing LSI, LSA, right? But that's where the magic of SEO works, is that people did read the end, meaning that was for advertising. LSA is at the core of Google AdSense, not search.
So latent semantic indexing was invented in uh, the late 1980s by a bunch of people at Bell Labs. They came out with a paper about it. They came out with a patent on it. The patent has a description about how it works. The description talks about a database with 8 books worth of material. And in the patent, they tell you every time you add new data, new information that you want included in that index, you need to run the whole LSI process over again.
It's
So
impossible to, it's so costly.
the web changes so
Yeah.
quickly that if you're using something like LSI, you would have to constantly run LSI index over and over and over again. But also, it's an indexing process. It's not an optimization process.
Exactly. It could be useful to detect content that are close to each other, like somebody is rewriting a piece of content. But first of all, it's too heavy from an algorithmic point of view, and second, it's too powerful. If they
So
would put it in search, they would. I mean, there would be nothing left because
I get some
it's
people upset with me when I say, okay, another reason why Google doesn't use LSI is because it's old. And people say, yeah,
yeah,
but people use old technology all the time. I mean, calculus has been around for a long time. And people still use it.
yeah. And the,
And,
the
and,
the
and, and
Salton cosinus is old, and it's still very interesting. It doesn't mean that LSI LSA is not interesting in itself. It's very interesting. What's wrong
and
is saying that it's into Google search without any proof and putting up tools that are supposedly gonna help you perform in SEO thanks to LSI.
well,
That's where it goes.
when I say LSI is old, it's not because it's old, it's because it's useless. It's because Google's come up with new ways, new approaches, and they use them. Uh, One of them they refer to as word embeddings.
Mm.
Okay, so they developed this word embedding process which uses more robust technology, something that can be updated quicker. That looks at the relationships between words on a big corpus, like
Mm-mm.
all the Wikipedia and all the book corpus from Google's book scanning project, to understand the relationship, the semantic relationship between words. So when something like RankBrain uses word embeddings, it's to rewrite queries and identify words that might be useful to be included in that query that have been left out.
And there's also a patent I read on your blog about phrases, not the pattern from for authors, but the fact that in the context some phrases relate to other phrases, so it's even beyond words now.
Right, the semantic topic modeling from
Yeah,
phrase-based
yeah.
indexing. Yeah. So
So okay,
a page about
LS.
okay, so a page about the White House has the phrase President of the United States and Rose Garden and Oval Office on it,
Mm,
which are semantically the types of things that would be on a page about that topic.
mhm. The whole game is, in fact, yes. What we see is old school SEO. All right, back in
Yeah.
the days, we didn't care about content, title tag, and links, right? And you could see that the block of content had some value, but it was not as powerful as just title tag and backlinks. And throughout the years, we see this block of content taking more and more importance because Google doesn't understand like a human brain. It's still very, and especially with the machine learning, I think it's even dumber than before. We'll talk about it.
It's
Actually, no, we can talk about it now. What's your point of view on this switch to machine learning or deep learning? I don't want to call it AI. It's too fancy.
neural networks were original to AI when it was first invented, when it first came out in 1956, when they started coming up with the kind of fundamental core of AI. They included neural networks. Thing is, they weren't too good. They weren't too effective. They were like one level deep. And it's taken them a while to come up with computers that have been fast enough to build neural networks with enough layers for them to be as effective as they are today. And we're
I think
seeing
it's coming up.
we're seeing Google come out with they came out with a word representation vectors patent recently that said we can take websites, classify them based upon industries and levels of expertise within those industries. So we can have medical sites that are written by doctors, medical sites that are written by medical students, and medical sites that are written by lay people. So lay people, for instance, medical sites are things that people with diabetes experience, what they eat, what treatments they follow, how they exercise, things like that. Those are the types of, and Google also took typical queries that people perform from query logs and analyzed those and tried to equate them with different, they call them knowledge domains, but they're the topics that queries might fit into. They classified the queries.
Got it.
And when somebody, and they've classified the websites using neural networks, and when somebody searches for a very technical medical issue, like how do you treat diabetes? What medication do you use? That would be answered by one of these medical websites that's written by doctors. They're using neural networks to identify the expertise of the authors in the industry. And so they're limiting the amount of websites that a query might have to look through to find answers. So they're narrowing down how much work they have to do as a search engine using neural networks, using machine learning.
It's going fast. They're going to figure it out. They're going to build a solution that's robust enough. But people who are very involved in search pretty much all agree that right now it's dumbing down the information because there's no nuance, there's no finesse. It's they have to make a choice. So in your example, it's fine. But then if I ask you, what wine should I drink with the entrecôte, pepper entrecôte tonight? That's a lot more difficult.
I would probably prefer to ask that on Twitter rather than Google.
Yeah, but Google wants to answer that question too. And what's happening right now is some website, just because they arrange the data in a way that the search engine can understand it, that's the answer that's going to be displayed. So I don't know. I'm just a guy. In my opinion, they're going to figure it out. They're going to build something that's more robust with a little bit of finesse. I don't know how they're going to be doing it, but I see it working, and you see it too. Like, what's fascinating, and we see this machine learning. We see how they put out a little bit of everything, and vin is wine in French. I live in Andorra, which is kind of a Bermuda Triangle for Google. We don't have any, so I can break Google. I can get it to the matrix. So I typed wine in French, vin, and it was giving me all kind of information, because VIN means a lot of different things than just wine.
Yeah.
And then, depending on where you are, if most French people click on the links that refer to vin de wine, then Google is gonna go that way. Or if it's more about there's something about the cars, then Google is going to go that way. So what's fascinating is we see the process in the making. At least the people who are really studying and years, it takes years, and you know your keywords, and you're able to. But where do you, just your opinion, right? No facts, no data. In your opinion, how far is it gonna go? Are we gonna go into really matrix, right, with the chip in the brain, with Google all around us, or is it gonna be able to answer questions before we ask them? Where
there are multiple paths or tracks that Google can follow to answer questions. The multiple types of responses for vin or wine that you talked about. It's the same type thing in the U.S. with a search for Lincoln. Lincoln might return results for a former president of the United States. There's a Lincoln, Nebraska, which is kind of popular. There's a Lincoln car.
And there's a company,
when
electrical
people
company
search,
too. Yeah.
When people search for Lincoln, they choose which type of Lincoln they want to see. And then it's likely that they continue to see that type of result every time they search for Lincoln, because the search history has been tracked. And these are all entity type things. Abraham Lincoln is an entity. Lincoln, Nebraska is an entity. A Lincoln car is an entity. And this is kind of the path Google's taken where they're understanding a knowledge graph. So it's different from the machine learning approach. It's a different path that Google's taking. They're trying multiple paths to provide search results.
Got it. They went to the path of trying to, everything is something is in relation to something else for a reason. Why? Right? So, and let's remember that Google doesn't think about words. It's all vectors. It's all distance, right? It's all relationship. It's not, words don't exist for Google. It's not how it thinks, really.
Well, I mean, that's where they take the vector path. If they're taking the knowledge path, everything's a real world object, which has certain values and attributes and classifications, and they're responding to questions with answers about those attributes, the values of them.
So old school SEO, we had this word Lincoln, and we would put it everywhere we could in the source code, right? 200 times Lincoln, without worrying about the context, without worrying, just...
And we put in the anchor text.
You repeat the keyword as many times as possible, or the query, and that's it. And then there's this shift, this semantic SEO, which I don't think is a trend. It's the way to do it, where you actually you are good if you define something. If you're able to I like to illustrate it with the mystery word game. Okay? I have Lincoln the car, and I have to make you guess Lincoln the car, but I can't say Lincoln the car. So I have to come up with a whole bunch of whatever I can I can even draw, right? I can even whatever. And we have this word you have this word in the English language that we don't have in French. It's topical. Whatever regards the topic. I like it much better than semantic, because it's exactly what I mean. Topical it's a lot more than lexical field. It's a lot more than, it's whatever is around the topic, and it's not about keywords. It's about maybe clusters, ideas, project, concepts. What's your take on that? This shift from just keywords to topics, or whatever you want to call them. Is it just a trend, or is it really the way to go?
Okay, so if you use Google Trends, you can type a word into Google Trends, and sometimes Google will show you that there are a couple of different choices for what you're searching for. Say you choose a baseball team. the Chicago Cubs. You type that in, and they'll tell you you can look at Chicago Cubs as a search term, or you can look at Chicago Cubs as a baseball team. If you choose baseball team, what you're choosing is what Trends calls a topic. So that's how it's tied to what you're just saying. But what they mean is this is an entity.
Of course.
They're in the, if you go to the Chicago Cubs baseball team page for trends about the team, and look at the URL, they're using a machine ID in the URL encoded in HTML. So the slashes don't appear there, but they're using Freebase machine IDs. So they're tying it into the knowledge graph. So they've associated entities with topics in trends.
That was a big move, because also let's remind everybody that Amit Singhal left Google.
Yeah.
And that the people running Google right now, Jeff Dean and I forgot the other one, are just AI guy. So the Google we knew back in the days is I don't say it's gone. There's still some but explain to us the shift of going into things from like, what does that mean as a whole? What and for us from an SEO perspective, what's the implication of this entire shift for search in general and Google in particular?
Okay, so what do you call car? What's your word for automobile?
Yeah, voiture, automobile, voiture, automobile, same.
Okay, so search no longer becomes about the word; it's about the thing itself. So if you call something one word in French that I use in English as a different word, we're still searching for the same thing. We just aren't looking for the appearance of that word on a page. We want a page about that object.
And I think it goes beyond the page. My what I call the topical mesh is it's going on the page, but it's also the environment around the page within the site and also around the page. It's all the same system. Who is in relation to what and why on the page, around the page, within the site, and around the URL. Friendly reminder: it's URL by URL that Google sees the web, not the domain authority thing, which is another myth. What's your take on the domain authority myth?
It's traditionally going all the way back to the roots of Google and Backrub and the idea of PageRank, named after Larry Page. It wasn't a page ranking, but it was. It was a page-by-page ranking of the web. And they use a scientific citation approach to see how much value each page had by how much it was referred to by other pages. So the more a page was referred to by other pages, and the more important those referrals were from other pages, the higher something would rank. So it was a matter of each individual page standing up for each other.
I don't think. I think somebody else invented the PageRank, right? He just took it. But I think wasn't there someone before, actually? I don't remember. It's something fishy like that. I don't remember exactly the details. There was
Garfield who did scientific citation work. Where he did research on citations.
Before Page, right?
That was used by Page for PageRank too.
And I'm sure. I mean, you got signals assigned to a domain, right? Of course, you got signals assigned to a domain, but in the way the SEOs use this domain authority thing is meaningless. It's just like I said, the homepage is just a page. it's just a big page because all the links are pointing out to the homepage. But trying to and I see people trying to make decisions based on this domain authority thing, especially when deciding, okay, subfolders or subdomain and so on and so on. No, a page is a page.
I think Google confuses people sometimes when they start talking about things like some websites are authoritative. The domains themselves are authoritative. If you want help, if you want a question answered about health in the United States, you go to the CDC website because it's an authoritative site on health.
Yeah. And it goes beyond that, because then we can take the slope to the trust rank, which is a patent by Yahoo, and then
and if we go to local search, we've got a specific domain that's an authoritative domain for a business, and that's the domain that Google will point to in a local search when you search for a business at a specific location. They'll say, okay, that's this domain.
So you're right. It's a confusion, and also it's confusing because yes, authority is indeed something, and you talked about branding and the value of building your brand, and you are a brand in yourself. Your name is also what we could call an entity in itself. You're even beyond that. You're history now. You're part of the history, and you can appreciate and you can see how you actually became really like a known entity, and that's a good example of how someone with hard work, with persistence, with dedication can actually become part of something much bigger than the individual himself. And that's the interesting part. So you're right by saying it's confusing and that Google might not be very clear on that. But I don't even think they really know, because especially in Mountain View, they all work on little bits. And it's only someone like you who sees the wide angle picture.
Just read the book In the Plex by Stephen Levy from Wired.
Okay, hold on. In the Plex. Okay, got it.
Okay, I asked this because it humanizes Google. It tells a lot of the stories behind the founding and behind certain movements there.
I read The Search by John Battle, which talked about all the other ones, but also Google.
You mentioned Amit Singhal, who left Google.
Yeah.
But there are other people who've been just as deeply involved in things like semantic learning at Google, like Ramanathan Guha, the guy behind Google Custom Search Engines, and Google's version of TrustRank, which isn't really TrustRank like Yahoo's TrustRank. That's another myth that there's a Google TrustRank. What this is he said, okay, people who identify websites that are about specific topics in Google custom search engines are building trust in those websites for those topics. So there's a photography review site that I think Amazon bought like 4 or 5 years ago that used to have incredible reviews of cameras. Okay. And people used to always link in custom search engines to that website about camera reviews.
Interesting.
So it became a trusted website about camera reviews.
Got it.
And the trust rank at Yahoo has nothing to do with boosting rankings of pages. But this approach to trust from Google, where people would choose websites for topics to be searched, actually can boost those websites for those topics.
In your opinion, how much of this whole volume of patents, or even research in general, really goes into production?
There's such a wide range these days at Google. They're not all about search. I'd say a very small percentage of them are. They're getting about between 30 and 50 new patents granted to them every week.
Wow.
And I'd say maybe 5 or so of those are related to search.
Mm-hmm.
And the other 35 are related to other things like cameras or computers.
Yeah, the cloud also. They were big on the cloud.
Yeah.
So now, what's your advice on, and actually, how do you look at the patents and trying to use them? Or maybe, let me rephrase, sorry.
Yeah.
Isn't it maybe a better advice to start by knowing who is behind the patent, who are the people, right? Trying to understand, because those algorithms are just tools, means to achieve something. But if you understand and think about it when you say, okay, read in the plex, because it's human beings who are trying to build something, and just by reverse engineering or trying to understand what they want is also a piece of the puzzle.
So when new patents come out every week, I'll go through them and I'll try to find ones that I would think I'm most interested in, based upon the titles first. And then if the title is interesting enough, I'll read through the patent and see what it's about. Once I find ones that I think are interesting, I'll research the inventors to see what else they've written, what other patents they've worked on, what papers they may have worked on, because sometimes you'll run across a patent that's based upon some paper that was written before. And usually, if you read the paper, you get a better idea of what the patent's about and how it works.
True. I agree with that. Yeah, the paper is sometimes more interesting than the patent itself.
So I came across one in 2004 from an inventor called Anna Lynn Patterson.
Mm-hmm.
I started researching her and I found out she probably built the largest search engine to be built in the 21st century.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, it was called Recall, and it was a demo search engine for the Internet Archive.
Okay.
And it would search all the different versions of all the websites on the Internet Archive.
Okay. Wow. I
Which
didn't
is
know about that
an incredible
one.
number of websites, right?
Wow,
Web
that's
pages.
big.
Yeah. And the demo for Recall disappeared at the Internet Archive one day. And CNET reported that Google had purchased a demo from the Internet Archive about 2 weeks later.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. And then about 2 weeks after that, Anna Patterson left the Internet Archive and started working at Google.
Okay.
As like a vice president of search.
Yeah. You see, it's people sometimes don't look at the right places because I didn't prepare. Okay, I asked you on the spot, and everybody I talk to who is what I call a search engine hacker, we all do that. We investigate the people. We try to figure out the people.
You mentioned earlier in our discussion phrase-based indexing.
Yeah.
Anna Lynn Patterson was the one behind phrase-based indexing.
And also the company MetaWeb, which is also, I mean, using FreeBasic, is one of the guy leading search right now was the founder of MetaWeb, I think.
The guy who was the head of search at Google for a while before he left and joined Apple.
Also, yeah.
John. Not sure how to pronounce his last name. It's a long Italian name. He's now the head of artificial intelligence at Apple.
If you can figure out the people, it's a big piece of the puzzle. Big piece. Then next piece of the puzzle. You said sometimes you find more interesting the paper, right? The research paper than the patent itself, because the patent is kind of in a specific format. And now, how do you extrapolate? How do you draw a conclusion on whatever you could find interesting into the evolution of search in general, or Google in particular?
Use the tools available to you. Do more searches in the patent office to find related patents. Use Google Scholar to find papers that might be related to it. Look on LinkedIn to see what type of career the person behind the patent built. I've been enjoying patents from specific people for a while. There's one guy named Tristan Upstill who wrote about search quality issues at Google. And I looked him up in LinkedIn, and he was the head of Google's core ranking algorithm, their core ranking group for a while. So he was in charge of what actually they were doing and what they're investigating. So looking at his patents, said these were some really important things that he wrote about because he was in charge.
Interesting. Okay. I didn't know that one. And also, I plead guilty sometimes. It's almost a troll. For example, to oversimplify, sometimes I tell people, wrong brain is the boss at Google, which is an oversimplification, almost a troll, because like you said, wrong brain by itself is just meaningless without all the rest. But I think it's a symbol, right? It's a noun that it resonates with, because I don't want to call it AI and machine learning, deep learning, so whatever. Please explain to us how all these layers are kind of building this whole machine. Like it's very complex. Do they even have a complete view of what they're building? I don't even know.
So there was a researcher, a computer scientist named James Firth, who came out with the statement that you shall know a word by the company it keeps. Okay, so he looked at how words tend to co-occur with each other in different places. Now, sometimes that's a little bit misleading. It's like the word amazing and Spider-Man tend to show up frequently together in the press, in the news, in books, and so on. They have no actual semantic relevance to each other.
Of course, yeah. But because they are linked together in so many documents, then they become relevant.
So the word embedding approach that Google came up with is based upon this co-occurrence of words in lots of places, lots of documents, very huge corpuses. So this is like LSI for the 21st century.
And you also mention often that basic algorithms like TF-IDF or even the Salton cosinus and so on, it's not that they are outdated. They're still interesting. Or Ngram, I like also Ngram. It's still interesting to look at, but they are way past that, right?
Google may use TF-IDF and things like query refinements, but it's just one step, one small part. There are lots of other things that they're doing.
And how do you, what would be the approach, what advice would you give to what I call the algorithm chasers, right? I think it's, well, I'll let you, what's your point of view on those chasing the algorithm kind of strategy?
I'm reading a book right now called Once Upon an Algorithm, which says that, okay, an algorithm is a method of solving problems. And if you approach algorithms that way, it's a lot easier when you talk about algorithm chasers and replace the word algorithm with the word problem solving. They're problem solving chasers. They're trying to find answers.
Yeah, but they're trying to find quick tricks or
Well, if they're not careful, they're engaging in cargo cult science.
exactly. Yeah, that's what I mean. You have the
So they need to ask questions. Okay, so you do a huge correlation study with millions of results, and you see that there's a correlation between one thing happening and something else, like ranking. Your next step isn't to publish a paper saying, look, there's a correlation. Yay. Your next step should be, what causes that correlation? Is there a causation? Is there a relationship? It's like, did you know that when in convenience stores, when the sales of beers increase, the sales of diapers also increase? There's a correlation.
true.
And they investigated and found there's causation.
Yeah.
When young fathers go to convenience stores to buy diapers as they've been instructed, they often reward themselves by buying beers.
Amazing.
So there's a connection.
Amazing. Love it. Love
So
it.
one predicts the other, but it's also connected to it.
Oh, that's
So-
very
So,
that's a
so
good example.
find the causation behind the correlation. If you do that, you're actually doing science. You're not doing cargo cult science.
I like the 2,000 word limit type of myth, because when you go beyond the correlation, yeah, it does make sense that if you want to be relevant around the topic, you're gonna need a bunch of words, right? And maybe around a few thousand.
It depends on the topic.
Yeah, if it depends.
I mean-
Of course, it depends on the topic, and it depends on the queries.
Depends on the intent behind the search too.
And I had an example with a credit simulator, a loan simulator, right?
Yeah.
In French, and the top results they have like 200 words, right? But it's a good loan simulator.
When I do a search at lunchtime for pizza, I don't want the history of pizza. I don't want detailed recipes of pizza. I want a place I can drive to and pick up pizza or call and have them deliver.
And like you said, cargo
Doesn't
cult,
require a lot of words.
they're doing it backwards. They're looking for something, and it's also this cognitive bias of confirmation. You want to look at something, and all the clues are pointing to that thing. So now, what does it take? You say, okay, try to find what causes the beyond the obvious, but also, don't you think that sometimes, like you do you take a photography? You spoke about photos, but are you a photographer? So I mean,
I take lots of pictures. I was told there are two ways to become a better photographer: look at lots of photographs or take lots of photographs.
But you also know that you should see what others don't see. A good photographers is going to see relationship and shade between the shapes, the light. A good photographer is going to see what regular people don't see. And I think it's the same for SEOs. If you stare long enough at the search engine result page, all the clues are there. Google is trying to tell you something.
Yeah. To become a good photographer, you have to be able to look at a scene and know if you're there at the right time.
Yeah.
If you should come back in 2 or 3 hours or 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
If the thing that you're looking at would be much more interesting in 2 or 3 weeks, and it might.
That's the famous decisive moment is not when you release the shutter, is being at the right place at the right time. That's the decisive moment, not the snapping the picture is just 1/500th of a second. The being
when I want to take a photograph of the moon, I can point my cameras at the moon and take a snapshot, or I can find something else to be in that picture with the moon.
Yeah.
Like the steeple of a church.
Sure. Like a foreground and symbol. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And it makes a much more interesting picture when I do that.
And same for SEO and Google in particular. Like I said, the clues are there. It's in front of you. It's just you got to train yourself to see, to to understand. I call it the smell of the SERP, or the footprint, or the perfume. Each search engine result page has a specific perfume, or maybe not everyone, but and if you are able to understand what does Google want instead of what does Google have. Google
And this
has
is why
something right now, and it wants
It's
something
why
else.
this is why SEO should talk more. So I refer to that as a SERP space
Mm. But what's your
because
point on people not being able to see what's in front of them exactly like a photographer, and making the difference between what does Google has? Let's take a basic example, right? Women's shoes. You got the first 100 results, product page or catalog of women's shoes, and your client comes up today and say, I want my my catalog, my product page to come up on that, to be first on that keyword. Well, Google already has is throwing up product pages of women's shoes. Is it what it wants? I don't know,
yeah,
but
let me modify that example slightly.
okay.
So it's based on the first place I did SEO at, which was an in-house position. And we found out that if we were ranked number 2, we had a lot more conversions
Mm-hmm.
than we were ranked number 1. If we were behind a government website that provided information only about the services that we provide,
Mm.
because people would read the informational site, learn about it, and then go back to search results and choose us and get us to provide that service for them. So it was much better being ranked number 2 in search results than number 1.
I have
So
a similar
understanding
example. Yeah.
understanding the intent
Mm.
behind the websites is one way of exploring the SERP space that gives you information, possibly
Mm.
benefits you. Knowing when to be second can really make a difference.
I have the exact same example where first was official website, government website, and my client was second. Is like, how do I become first? I mean, you don't. What we're gonna
You
do?
know what? First,
What we're gonna do is we assume. I mean, not assume. It was a fact that the government website was a very, and it was a while ago, right? So the information was not clear. So what we say, okay, come over here in 5 minutes. We're gonna tell you what's up, and that's it. Uh,
write
but
your
mm,
description,
yeah,
write your snippet
mm,
so that
yeah.
people know that you're the
Mm.
place to go to. Yeah.
And now the trend of, okay, women's shoes. Now I'm gonna write the history of women's shoes in 2,000 words. No, that's not what Google wants. That's not what the user wants. So be a little more, go a little more beyond that. But of course, Google wants to achieve something. He wants to answer different intents, because
Yeah.
women's shoes is kind of broad, even if it's well, within this vertical. Google can decide that it's only the people want to buy, women want to buy women's shoes. It could be something else, but I think it's a little bit this whole like trend of, okay, I'm gonna make a big piece of content about the whole topic, like a Wikipedia. We call it the Wikipedia approach. No, no, be a little more than that, and it's about user intent. And a lot of the patterns you showed up, how about, I mean, the update page layout and so on, and page speed. Yeah, it's all very important. If you match the user intent, that's when it's gonna happen.
So last couple times I've shopped for women's shoes have been allergy-free shoes,
Mm,
and that narrows the niche down significantly. And you
that's
have to
interesting. Mm,
identify uh, what it is that makes your shoes healthy for people who might be allergic to many other shoes.
Mm-mm. But don't you have the feeling sometimes that we need to reboot the web, meaning that could we just start from a core, right, of trusted website and then rebuild little by little instead of trying to sort out this mess?
I think that's going on all the time.
What do you mean?
We don't necessarily notice the changes that are taking place in front of us, but they are happening.
So you mean around you, you're making a small web of your own, something like that?
Okay, things happen like, do you remember the Google directory?
Yes, of course. Open, which was the Open Directory project. Yeah.
Why did it disappear?
Well, my theory is that it goes back to the topical PageRank, because at the base of the topical PageRank is how they used the architecture of the Open Directory project. And they had enough data. They figured out, okay, they used the users were clicking here and there to figure out this is linked to this because of that. And then machine learning, but that's only my theory. I don't know. What's yours?
So my theory is it didn't scale to the web. It didn't grow. It wasn't fast enough. It didn't make enough changes. It was too dependent upon human judgment and human decision making. And
Yeah.
that's where it failed.
I thought it was just an experiment to see patterns in because if you read the topical PageRank, right? They clearly use the ODP as a source to classify.
Right, and it was a way to do focus crawls of the web, and they can use Wikipedia to do that now.
But interesting. I like also your view and say, yeah, it wasn't scalable and they didn't need it anymore one way or another. And you're right.
And knowledge graph at this point in time was very dependent upon Wikipedia. It's now moving away from a dependence on Wikipedia because, again, Wikipedia is human edited and it doesn't scale to the web. So we're going through changes and transformations. We may not notice them as we see them.
How big is the web? How big is the web?
There's probably at least a trillion. No, there are at least a few trillion pages.
It's humongous, huh? That's for sure. Humongous. We're not going to go into details about the reasonable surfer, random surfer. I saw your tweet today. The difference. That's pretty much details. But let's go more into this device. Because it's changing a lot of things. And I think SEOs are afraid to talk about this because we have our comfort zone about SEO aimed at Google desktop.
Yeah.
That we kind of figured out. But this is hard. This is very hard.
I'd said most Google patents these days aren't about search. So one that came out 2 weeks ago was Google can tell how crowded different transit systems are based upon things like location history.
Yeah.
So they can look at how many people with phones are on a bus and see how much traffic, how crowded that bus might be based upon location histories of all the people on the bus.
I'll go even deeper than that.
Yeah.
I read every quarterly report, and they don't mention Google search, the search engine. I'm waiting for the day when they'll be proud enough of what they're doing right now to tell the investors, okay, now we got our rank brain, blah, blah. But also I'm going to tell you a little story that my brother worked, he's one of the big like 3D visual effects and for Google Labs they hire those guys to think about the future, and it was about what if Google has a form, right? What if Google was all around us? And that's not secondhand. That's my brother who told me. Larry Page told him, people don't understand that I can't relate to Google. It was my back in college that I did that. The search engine. So you're right by saying I think we focus 100% on something that Alphabet and even the founders themselves don't even relate to anymore. They're way past it. So it's very dangerous because if we, and again, back to this and back to the world, back to vocal, back to because also it still works, it still makes money, it still generates revenue, but I feel we are afraid to, and it's gonna happen. We're gonna be in front of, okay, now it's a brand new world. Desktop, it's mobile only. Desktop is dead, and it's gonna be more difficult. And we can't, if we compare to how we do SEO on desktop for Google desktop version, I think it's the wrong path.
So there are a lot of similarities between desktop and phone. There are differences, and a lot of what Google's doing these days are based upon the phone first.
It's also maybe like the approach of, because people spend their day on this device, but they don't spend the whole time on Google. So SEO search goes beyond just Google. It goes onto YouTube, it goes onto Reddit, it goes onto Facebook, Instagram, wherever. And that's also where you come into play with your ideas, very creative, of solving the problem beyond, way before, because you push the content all over the place, and wherever the person is searching, you're there, or your client is there. Am I wrong? Is it the approach you take? As far as trying to solve this shift to Google desktop centric, where we live the golden era of 100% of the free traffic was coming from Google, and we didn't. It was simple. It was one keyword, one page, and a CTR, a certain ratio of clicks on the page. Now it's all over the place. It's all around us. And even I heard Bing is coming back a little bit. So again, do we chase each algorithm, each update, each thing, or do we try to solve the problem beforehand, like with the very good examples that you gave at the beginning of the conversation,
Well, let me add one real quick. A client who was an apartment complex, they were having trouble selling units in the building. They wanted to fill out the building. They had a website that was 4 pages long. Mm-hmm. They didn't include a lot of information that they should have included on the page. If you took the elevator in the apartment building down to the basement and got out, you would see the metro service under Washington, D.C.
Okay.
From the elevator door. You would walk out into one of the world's largest commuter systems that covers Washington, D.C., Southern Virginia, Northern Virginia, and Southern Maryland.
Okay.
You could travel to 39 different Smithsonian museums through that metro system.
Amazing.
You can travel to the football stadium where the professional football team from Washington played, the baseball stadium where the baseball team played. There were commuting around Washington, D.C. is terrible in the car. It's one of the last things you want to do.
I don't know.
If you live in an apartment where that metro, that subway system is right in your basement, it becomes a lot easier to get to places.
Okay.
They didn't have that on the website.
Okay.
They should have had information about the metro line and where it went to on the website to let people know how convenient it was to live there.
That's genius. I love it. Yeah. And
So this is the purpose of optimizing for entities, optimizing for real world objects. You say,
yeah.
okay, what actually exists here? Is it included? Do we have information about it?
There's a. I live right across the street from a data center, so my ping is 2 milliseconds, and there's a e-team sport that moves right next a couple of doors, right? So 80
Yeah.
professional video game players. Then I see a couple of those big YouTube Spanish, and they were looking for the ping, right? 2 millisecond ping, because when you play video games online, a millisecond makes the difference between life or death. So you're right. You say sometimes you can find value, but it's because your brain is trained like that. It's cultivated like that. It took years, and you have this approach, and you can see things that others don't see.
So we took that 4-page website. We started adding some of that information about those entities to the website, using blog posts that captured the information, let people know more about it, and we filled up that apartment building within a year.
Wow, that's very cool. That's very cool. Proof is on the screen, like I always say. It doesn't matter what Bill says, what I say. Does it work or not?
Yeah.
Does Google is going to tell you if it works or not. So, and also there's not one way to go about it. That's what makes it difficult. Maybe because I see we are going to hit the 2-hour mark. What about this 200 ranking signal thing?
There have been people who have been writing lists of ranking signals, ranking factors for years.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they identify things that aren't very accurate, and they don't do too much explaining. It's like the cargo cult science again, where you show the
it's usually a survey, right?
But you don't show the causation. Yeah.
It's a survey. They ask a bunch of people, oh, what do you think is number one, number two, number there? And that's it.
When somebody justifies something as a ranking signal because Google has a patent on it, and that's all they say, they link to the patent, and they don't explain any more. They don't show any of the possible connections or information that is evidence that patent might actually be used. Like I was saying, the phrase-based indexing is one patent that came out in 2004. But since it was published, 20 other patents about phrase-based indexing have been filed and granted that expand upon it, that explain more, explain how it's used. It's been updated 3 times, and each time it gets updated, they rewrite the claims in it to give examples of how it's been changed. If they weren't using it, they wouldn't be telling you how it's been changed.
And you're right that Google confuses people, because back to this 200 ranking factor seal, I think there's somewhere where they say, oh, we have about 200, but it doesn't mean it's out of the context, and it's just a trick. It's not a. It's so much more complex than that, and I think it's Google is guilty, SEOs are guilty on this, to oversimplify.
People grab onto certain types of things and say, okay, Google's definitely using this, but sometimes they're not using it quite the way you think they might be.
How do you see the difference? Right, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, so I wrote about a patent last week on search suggestions that Google offers. And it explains how they might use click information, long click information, and click selections in search results to identify the best search suggestions
Okay.
that they might offer to people, and their predictions about things that people might like that fill their informational and situational needs. They're
Makes
not
sense.
ranking. They're not ranking pages directly upon click information or click selections.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say these are ranking signals that Google uses. Well, they're not. They're not using them for ranking those things. They're using them to rank search suggestions.
Yeah.
Which is
That's
different.
funny. Yeah.
So if you investigate how things might be used, your list of 200 ranking signals doesn't become as straightforward, but it becomes more informative and more useful.
And it's so many layers upon layers upon layers, and it varies in time and on throughout the index. So it's a moving thing, and to build a general statement out of what you see on your little vertical on your little website. Oh, I cut off my AdWords campaign and my site dropped. Therefore, there's a link between Google Ads and organic search.
Right.
No, they look beyond. The explanation is maybe there was you sent so much traffic throughout this pipeline and it stopped one day to the next, that maybe it's some kind of thing, or maybe it's something else. I mean, there's always a reasonable explanation, and the human brain is wired like that. Why, when we see a bright light in the sky, we think it's a UFO? Yeah. Out of all the other possibilities, we're gonna look for the most extreme, right?
Well, if you look at the definition of UFO, it is a UFO.
True.
Because you don't know what it is.
True.
It's an identified flying object. Yeah. It's definitely identified. It's flying.
But you think there's like a couple of aliens in there, right?
Right.
So what it's amazing how we always trying to focus on the most. And when you tell the trick, when you say, okay, I'm back to search, when you explain it plain, okay, this is not it. This is not LSI because the algorithm, blah, blah, blah. And it's such a disappointment. People are like, oh, really? That's just it? There is no... but also, don't you think it's maybe SEOs build this mystery, this kind of magic sauce, or because a lot of people don't do what you do, trying to simplify, trying to explain. A lot of people make it more difficult.
I'm not necessarily simplifying, because I'm looking for the actual reasons, the causations, the connections, the things that you don't quite get on the surface. Like anchor text is very important for how pages rank, because Google takes the relevance of the words in that link and applies it to the site being linked to. And a Google patent that came out 10 years ago was updated like a year ago or so. And in the claims section, they say, we might look at a window of words around the anchor text. Mm-hmm. And we might see if any of those are useful, and we're calling those associated text. And that we might use hypertext relevance to point to the page being linked to, and use that associated text to give that page meaning.
Interesting.
So it's no longer just the anchor text.
Mm-hmm. It's what's around there. Makes sense.
We've become more complicated. It still makes sense for them to do that. So if you want to find out more about applied semantics, click here. And the word here is the anchor text, but what they're telling you about with that link is applied semantics.
Sure. That's interesting, because if we look beyond like the details of the pattern, it's all making sense. It's all about simplicity. It's all logical. Every time I tell a client or SEO, when there is something that's a little bit too twisted or too. Usually, it's not it. It's not it. Of
Right.
course, it's complicated.
The phrase for that is Occam's razor.
I don't know. What is it?
Occam's razor. When you come across a phenomenon that seems complicated, and there's a complicated answer for why it does what it does, and there's a simple answer for why it does what it was, look at the simple answer first.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, as a word of conclusion, I think we got to do it again because we barely touched the surface. I have so many more questions to ask you.
Okay.
But 2 hours, I think, is a big chunk for the viewers. The problem is we could talk for hours nonstop because we love what we do, and it's fascinating. But let's go back to my first statement about what made you a legend, living legend, is the never give up and go beyond, like just
Continue to be curious.
yeah, and go back to the minute where he explained how he goes to check out the guy behind the patent, the papers, and what he did, and his LinkedIn, and everything. Just don't trust no one. All you know is you know nothing, and you gotta go dig and figure it out because that's what I mean. Is there any other secret behind what made you what you are today?
Try to find the answer. Satisfy yourself.
Yeah.
Well, come up. Don't trust everything you read. Find the actual reasons behind things.
And
You're
it's
myself.
and it's a good advice even beyond search, beyond SEO, just in general, with all the fake news and everything that's going on. Like I see how when you take pictures and you see some of the photos about the COVID, and you're like, no man, you're cheating. It's a long lens, it's flat and everything. People are not on top of each other, and so on. So yeah, I think that mindset will make you a better SEO, but also in life will help you a lot to be able to figure it out your truth, and don't believe the obvious and go beyond what it seems. Not there's a phrase, not everything is what it seems, or something like that. Well, whatever. But yes, Bill, I'm gonna relieve you from this podcast duty.
I appreciate you being here. Thank you.
And yeah, if you would like, I would love to have you back to talk more about some more of because I feel we've talked about many things, but I have so much more. There is so much more we need to explore. So many more myths. So many and that shift where Google is going, what's going on now, and where it's going. I think we barely scratch the surface of that. So we need you need to come back and talk about where we are and where it's going.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you.